Okay, let's get started here. Welcome to the Senseless Steven and Steven Show. Today's theme is all about the waste management sector. And so let's jump right in. This industry, there's evidence in this industry going back over 5,000 years in Greece when it comes to waste management and collection. Steven, what is the status of the waste management sector today, especially when it comes to their digitalization journeys?
Well, I think you could say that there's a huge diversity in the sector. We work with companies that have advanced very much, where there's a lot of digitization activity going on, where tracking solutions are used to track basically where the assets are, where advanced planning tools are used to do the planning, to follow up on revenue. But on the other hand, we still see plenty of companies which are basically at the level of the Excel sheet, and a lot of knowledge within the organization with the dispatchers.
Like walking around with a clipboard maybe. Right?
Exactly. So there are a number of people who know in the company where things are, but like all things which depend purely on people doing things, it breaks down eventually, or at least there are gaps. And I think there is the opportunity for us to work together and basically move that digitization journey forward.
Mm-hmm. And what are the benefits of accelerating the digitalization journey for our customers?
Well, if you would ask me, I think if you look to a waste management company, the primary revenue generating asset is the container. Basically, it's a container you rent out. It's a container which is generating money for every cycle it does, depending on the business model. And so I think it makes a lot of sense to start tracking that primary asset, because if you know where it is and how it's going around, first of all, you avoid a lot of wasted time looking for the asset, so knowing where it is, but then you can start optimizing that.
Carefully chosen analogy, yes.
Basically, looking on how you can improve the number of rounds you do it.
Yep.
I mean, another challenge which we hear often is
making the most of the assets, basically.
Making the most of the assets and not having assets in your yard which are not generating money.
Yep.
And because that's another thing which we observe often is that our customers tell us, like, we keep buying new containers, but the business is not scaling in relation to those new containers acquired. And so something must be happening with these containers. Are they stuck in a yard? Are they left in the repair center? Are they just disappearing? It's very hard to know, because there's not a single moment where you line up all your containers in one row and really do the counting and say, hey, how many do I really have and where are they? And so what we bring to the table is basically that knowledge of, at any given moment, you'll know exactly where they are and you know what they've been doing. So the opposite of Vegas, actually.
The opposite of Vegas, indeed. Well, when you think of digitalization journeys, data and analytics, a huge component of that, a huge enabler of those journeys, right? And you've heard of that old phrase, garbage in, garbage out, right? How do we help companies get the most of the data coming from their containers so that they can have actionable insights?
Well, as you suggested, first point is indeed knowing where the assets is at any given time. So what we bring to the table at the basic foundation level is knowledge about every place where the asset has been. So whenever it moves, we'll tell you, we'll record it, we know where it came from and where it's going to. And so that's the foundation layer. Now, once you have built up that foundation layer, which is ultimately just a big bag of location points and timestamps, what we build up is knowledge like inventory levels. How do inventory levels over time evolve in certain areas? Now that becomes interesting, because if you have, imagine we have a repair area where containers which are due for repair get placed. Well, you should care about the inventory level in that zone. You should also care about dwell times in that zone. You don't want assets to linger more than 30 days in that zone, because it means somebody is not doing his job or her job to get that container repaired and get it back into the money generating flow. And so these are the types of things where our platform will proactively warn you based on the rules of your business. Because as a business owner in the platform, you basically define what are your constraints of the business. A container should move at least so often. It should never be there for more than this duration. And we'll give you a warning when any of these constraints are not satisfied. Because of course what we do not want to do is, let's say, trade going hunt for a container visually to having to click in a platform on 500 containers and one by one figure out whether there's something wrong. Right? So that's not what we do. We give it straight in your face. These are the problems you should focus at today.
So management by exception, basically.
Exactly.
Through alerts, right?
That's the whole idea. And so the way I always like to pitch it, if the system is configured correctly, you should only look at the alerts. Because everything else is
operating as it should.
Of course, if you're looking for a container, yes, and you would go and say, where is that one placed? Or if you're wondering, like, how long is that container on that location? Of course, go look, right? But in terms of management on the fleet as a whole, you would go alert-based. Go by exception. Everything else is fine. Don't touch it. Let it roll.
Okay, that's good. You speak a lot about basic use cases, location of containers, movement of containers, inventory management, looking at dwell times and stuff like that. What about more sophisticated applications such as installation of fill level sensors? What would be your advice to companies thinking about those?
So it's an option which exists. So we do have a solution which combines our trackers with the fill level sensors, so to measure how much the container is loaded, and which, depending on the use case, brings certain advantages. Like to give two examples, I know of a use case where people actually care that the container does not get filled too much, because the type of waste they're loading can potentially make the container really, really heavy, and they cannot lift it anymore. So they use the fill level sensor as a warning sign, and knowing, it's with this customer, they're loading this type of load, we should stop, tell them, go pick it up before they reach a certain threshold. The other use case of a fill level sensor is for customers that have an obligation to empty a container in time. Now, if you have a lot of containers around there and you only need to empty on a daily round 10% of them, it takes a lot of effort to go visit all of them.
That's right.
So that's the positive side, right? It can really help. To be honest, we need to also look at the practical side. The fill level sensor is based on a radar sensor, which is looking down. And so it requires a container with minimally a bar or a roof, where you can look down into the container. Not all containers will fit that description. And I think that also explains why it's not an option which we deploy for any type of a container all the time. And we reserve it for specialized use cases where that extra capability really, really provides value.
Right. Well, that was super helpful. So we've got basic use cases, which is what, 80% of the time, and then maybe 20% or so of customers wanting more sophisticated applications.
Yeah, I think also because we're fully into it, and I'm working on the engineering side, so we keep expanding, let's say, the advanced use cases all the time, but they tend to be sometimes, let's say, on the fringes of what people at the basic need. I always remember, we had one of our events last year where one of our key customers arrived, and we asked him, what's your favorite view or your favorite feature of the platform? And we were kind of expecting he's going to give that ultra cool super feature, and he's there saying, you know what, it's just I open the application first time and I see the asset map and I feel like I'm God of my world. I know it all.
I have control over my assets,
and actually,
yep.
it is a good point to bring also for us, because it really proves that and we're actually doing that we need to keep also bringing enough improvements on the fundamental core set, because that's what's used most, right? All the other things build from that foundation, and it's a starting point where it's important to reach that point first. Once you've built that baseline, yes, you can take things from there. Where are my assets now? Where have they been? How can I leverage that historical logic? But you need to take walk the ladder step by step.
Yeah, walk before you crawl.
Exactly.
Crawl before you run. That sort of thing, right? So
because I'm also having a few questions, because you're.
Oh no, that's not possible according to the rules.
You're actually new to the. Steve is our general manager in the US, and new to the business, and I think Waste Expo was your first adventure into waste. And you have a background in telecom, so definitely not a waste. So, just from talking to these customers at the show, I mean, what are your key observations?
You know, not that different from what you said. I think 80% of the customers or more wanted to know, where are my containers? How much am I using my containers or not, right? Basic use cases such as that. There were a few potential customers that we're looking at fill level sensors as well. But for the most part, basic use cases. The industry is probably a laggard when it comes to the digitalization journey relative to other industries. But I think fast catching up because data and analytics is becoming important here as well. And so that's what I think those are my general observations.
No, I think I would like to, I think it's a valid observation indeed. There's still a lot of potential for digitalization. Now, I think if you look at the company sizes we talk to, I think there are a few gigantic waste companies, and we're actually working with a good number of those. Mm-hmm. But the majority of the companies are regional companies, of I would say mid-sized companies, which in my view is also an opportunity for digitization because it means that the decision lines to move forward are really, really short.
We saw that a lot, right? We saw massive companies like Waste Management and mm-hmm. Republic and others, and then we saw smaller family-run organizations with, let's say, 300 containers in Alaska.
Where the owner is present.
Where the owner is
so
present,
direct
who
contact.
inherited the business from his parents, that kind of thing, right? So,
exactly. So I think there's quite some potential to, if the solution works, the price is correct.
Well, on that subject, what if you are a waste management company today and you're thinking about tracking solutions, but you're not too sure of the ROI? You're a little hesitant to make the investment. What guidance would you give those kinds of companies? How do they get started?
That's a very good question, because that's a question we get really, really often, is what the return on investment of installing such a tracker solution. And there are a couple of things in that equation which are easy to calculate. The price of our trackers and the cost of the subscription going with it, that's black and white. That's super easy. Now, on the other hand, what are you going to gain? We need to look at a couple of things. There is the cost of assets lost, which you could recover, although I need to say, in all fairness, it's not because you track it, you're necessarily going to recover it. So in my experience, recovering stolen assets is not the best use case to go after. Then there is the cost of the inconvenience of having to look for a tracker. You could try to express that in hours per week, the cost of these hours, but and then there is the potential.
Not a tracker, a container. The cost of looking for a container.
Exactly. Yep. And then there's the potential of doing improvements. And I think there's the biggest, what we very often see is that our customers dramatically overestimate before they start tracking the activity of their containers. And so there is that belief that they rotate really often, and once you start measuring it, we see the reality. And then, of course, if I lease a container on a month to you, I don't care how much it's moving. I actually rather not have it move, right? Because then there's
It's generating revenue.
It's generating revenue anyway. However, if you paid by the cycle, then it really matters how much they're moving.
You want to redeploy that as fast as possible, right?
Exactly. And if you have that opportunity to reduce or stop expanding your container fleet because you are suboptimal, that provides a lot of opportunities. Like I worked recently with a customer which was like a conglomerate, and so they did a few mergers of waste companies, but there was never any optimization done across these individual waste companies. So once we started looking at the inventory collections, you could really, really see that, hey, region A has plenty of stock while region B is probably going to ask for new containers. So, and then we're at my last point. If people ask, hey, what's the cost? I often say, hey, look at our tracker cost and please add one full-time person to it, because you're going to a transformation project of that digitization, and just buying a tool on itself will not cut it.
Right.
And so you need to spend the time to optimize these things. My example of the two regions is not because the tool says that there are containers here, that the operational procedures are created to make that transfer of assets happen. It should fit in a larger transformation exercise.
Our customers may need to hire somebody, or they can repurpose somebody that's already there, walking around checking on these containers with their clipboard, right? Now we can digitize not only the company, but the individual. And so
it's a good point you bring, because if you look to, again, cost of time lost, etc., we're not advocating, hey, get rid of that person, right? And it's not going to happen most of the time. And what's going to happen is that person will do more useful things with meaningfully contribute to the business, rather than spending time on overhead, which wouldn't be there. Now, to come back, so calculation might be difficult. Now, what is super easy is to do a proof of concept.
You read my mind. That was going to be the next question.
So what you do, if you're in doubt, is it worth doing it, is get a reasonable number of trackers. Don't do one, because you don't learn anything with one, but minimally 5 to 10.
Speaking of trackers, this is one of them, right?
Exactly. So get a trial going, 10 of these trackers, put them to your assets, let it run for 2 months, and then see what it gives. And then I think the data should speak for itself. Either you say, oh, I would like all my assets to give me this kind of visibility, or, you're not yet at the point where you think it adds value to the business, and then we're equally good friends. We'll see you again maybe in a couple
Or start with a subset of assets, right?
Or you start with a subset of your most valuable assets. But get going, see for yourself what it brings. And
a proof of concept, or in other words, a trial, is very low cost, very low lift to get that done as well. Just a couple more questions, shifting gears. Talk about how the Sensolus solution helps when it comes to sustainability efforts and ensuring compliance in this industry.
Well, it's again a good question. So if you look at sustainability, it's actually an equation we should look at. Because on the one hand, of course, we're building electronics and batteries, and we're putting some new things in the field where we do recycling, etc. But we always do it with the aim of reducing the number of assets which are in use, improving their rotations, reducing useless transports, because you're transporting an asset to a place where there's already plenty. And so the environmental saving is indirect, but it is real. It's
intrinsic with the solution that Sensolus
exactly
offers. Right?
It's by nature an optimization solution. And so sustainability is key. And if you talked about compliance, it really depends a bit in the sector, but there are parts of this waste sector where there are indeed tight regulations, like a container cannot linger for more than this time on such a location. If you're ever forced to prove that, or tracking data can definitely help. And then talking again to the return on investment, the thing with compliance is that the penalty side is sometimes virtually unlimited, or so off the charts compared to the cost of the solution, that those could be the easiest cases actually to make that return on investment call.
Okay, that was helpful. I just have one final question for you. Given your behavior in Vegas just a couple months ago, do I have your vote to sign up yet again for a round 2 in Las Vegas next year at the Waste Expo? The combination of brains and good looks, this works. Do I have your vote to join me next year, Steven?
You can count me in. Let's do it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Right. Well, this is the first episode of the Sensolus Steven and Steven show, all about the waste sector, but look forward to next ones covering industrial manufacturing, transport and logistics,
and blackjack.
And blackjack.